Hey, Nick Collier here again, and it's story time. I know it's been a long time since I've said hello, but I'm busy. I got other things happening, and now I get a moment to walk into the story time. First, I want to kind of bring you in on all of the things that's happened in the last 6 months, maybe. Last winter we had an epic snowstorm, and literally the snow was 6 feet deep. And we had to get on the roofs and shovel snow off of the roofs before the buildings collapsed. That took 4 days of incredibly hard work. But because of that snowstorm and because of all of the really heavy weather we had last winter, all of the fruit trees are going absolutely nuts. I'm going to bring you around and show you the cherry tree that we have right now. And the cherries are almost ripe, but typically this tree produces 10, 20 cherries per branch. And this year it's more like 100 cherries per branch. But the birds, of course, get them all. We've covered a couple of branches with a screen so that they don't get into it. But I'm going to just scan you around and show you what this tree is doing as of now. I mean, you got to check it out. Look at that. What, 100 cherries per branch? This is incredible. So far the cherries are kind of small, but as they get riper and riper, they get bigger and bigger. And they just keep coming back around here, and it looks like this whole bunch is really ripe. So we're going to pop a couple off and put them on our mouth. They are good. So, and the rest of the tree, you can kind of see back in there, and this is the part that we protected so that the birds don't get to us or get to those cherries. And look back here, and that branch we forgot to protect, and the birds haven't seen it yet, so we might be safe. Now, because of that epic snowstorm we had, and we have literally, all of June has been just spectacular. I mean, the temperature has been right in the 60s and 70s. We've had rain almost every day, which is, unheard of in the Western Sierra foothills. And because of that, right now, the mosquitoes are absolutely crazy. And that's why I've got this little incense in my hair, because the mosquitoes can't find me. Mosquitoes find you by your breath. The carbon dioxide coming out, they follow in and find it, and then of course, they nail you. So as long as I have this incense blowing, I don't get bothered as much. So, on to story time. Let's see. Let's just go way back. I moved here in 1974, not to this property, but to Nevada County in 1970. A rooster. In 1974. And that first summer I spent hanging out in all of the rivers, and oh man, it was just an amazing summer. And that autumn I ran into a group of people that lived up in Camptonville, which is about 40 miles from Nevada City and a good 5 miles from the nearest store of any kind. There was a little gas station along the side of the highway. That was the only store. And that winter, I moved onto this hippie commune, and there was like 30 or 40 young people there. It was like a family. I was home. It was the best place I could think of, and everybody was committed to being there. And there was a little bit of struggle here and there, but it was good in general. But by about November, during the first rainstorm, and it was the worst rain in probably a decade at that point. It rained all of November. By about mid-November, almost everyone was gone. They all got money from their parents and flew to Mexico to go to a workshop. And, you know, I didn't have money, so I'm stuck. I lived in the barn in a small room, had plenty of wood, had plenty of food, because all of those people gathered food all autumn, and I got to eat their food. And that's where I learned to read. Up to that point, I was functionally illiterate. But I lived in the library, and it took me probably a month or so before I realized there were books and that I could read them. So I picked up a book and I started reading it, and I just told myself that if I didn't understand a word, I would just skip it and keep going. And so I did, and I was reading for pleasure. And so that winter I probably read 50, 75 books. I just consumed them. Yeah, there was nothing else to do. No electricity, very little running water, outdoor toilets, and no radio, no TV, no nothing. But I was there, and by December it snowed about 4 feet, and the snow didn't go away until that next spring. So I was stuck. And after, I don't know, maybe the 60th or 70th book, I picked up this book called Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. Now, Kesey wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test prior to writing Sometimes a Great Notion. Excellent book. I totally recommend it. But so I read this book, and I got to the end, and I said, I could write like that. Kesey had an amazing style, but it was fairly simple. It wasn't complex, not a bunch of big words, just real basic. And I thought to myself, geez, I could write like that. And so, it took another decade for that thought to actually kick into gear. And I was probably about 35 at the time, and I stopped smoking pot, which was, one of my nemesis. And within about a couple of weeks, I started writing. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote for the next 12 years to finish my first novel. And then from there on, I was committed because I really liked the process. And so since then, I've written 16 novels. About 7 years ago, after this whole scenario with almost becoming a movie, right? The Biker Bob series, and I told you about that earlier, I just got really frustrated with the publishing industry. I mean, here I was, I think I've got some pretty good books, and nobody's paying attention. I sent out 1,000 queries and got back about a dozen. Everybody else just threw me in the garbage can. It was pretty disappointing. So anyhow, I quit. I said, screw it, I'm done. I got other things to do. So 7 years ago, for the last 7 years, I haven't written hardly a word. All of that writing was inspired by that one book written by Ken Kesey, Sometimes a Great Notion. Now not he. Now, 7 years later, Barbara and I are on the Mendocino coast, and And we go to sleep that night. We're sleeping in this old 1800s hotel right downtown Mendocino. And we go to sleep, and I have this dream. And it's one of those dreams where there's an entire story. And it's like, it was complete. The beginning, the middle, the end. It was like, oh, and I woke up and I went, oh God, I gotta write this thing down really quick. And I tried to, and I fell back asleep. And then I woke up a couple hours later, and I'm like, oh man, I lost it. But I had still about 10% of the story. So I jumped out of bed and I ran downstairs to the lobby with my computer, and I just started writing down this storyline. And I got really excited about it. And I had forgotten how much fun it was to write. And so the next morning, I went down early in the morning to the lobby and wrote another page or two. Next morning, another page or two. Next morning, and it's now 2 months later, and I'm 70 pages in to my next novel, my 17th novel. And I'm having a great time. Now, during the 35 years that I wrote every day, I was determined. I was like, we're going to do this, it's going to happen. And so coming at it from that point of view, I always wrote one page. And I just like, that's it, one page. I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to do any less. But this book is different. Now, the interesting thing is, about 2 months, no, more like 2 weeks before we went to Mendocino, ever since I started writing, I've had a problem with reading novels. And I love reading novels because I edit my own books. And in editing, I'm constantly, looking for mistakes, grammar issues, punctuation, all of that. And so I can't read a novel because, on every page there's at least 5 or 6 some kind of mistake or some kind of issue. And that's all I can see on the page. And so I get lost in the editing and I don't get to enjoy the story. So I thought, a couple months back, I thought, well, if I just read some of the books that I read when I was in my 20s, maybe something will happen and I can kind of loosen up a little bit. So I started reading some of those old books. Well, I can't remember, what did I read? Anyhow, it doesn't matter. But at one point, I ordered Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. And so this whole scenario, I'm about, 20, 30 pages into this book, and I'm really enjoying, having had 30-something years of writing experience, I get to go back and read his book from a writer's point of view, and it's like everything works. I mean, it's a mess, don't get me wrong. This guy is all over the map, but he's all over the map in a way that's like exciting. And I was like, and the other thing is that he gets really involved in the character, about the characters, how the character feels about this, and why his dad did that to him, and what it changed and moved him into a different direction. All of this intricate stuff, and and I'm like, this book it might be 600 pages, and so it kind of has this influence on me. And once I start writing again, I'm still reading his book, probably 5 pages, 10 pages at a time, and I realized this last week that I read Ken Kesey's book almost 50 years ago, and I started writing. It inspired me to write. And I read it almost 2 months ago, and it inspired me to write differently. What I'm doing now, and it's really a flow, is I'm getting involved in the the emotion of the character, and really stretching that part out, and getting involved into the personalities. Whereas in all of those years, I was an action writer. Step one, step two, step three, we're going to get to the end. And then once I was done, I came back and I filled in the personality part. It's just how I wrote. This new way of writing, I'm writing now at 4 or 5 pages every sitting. And I get lost, and I can't. It's like I look up and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Next time I look up, it's 4:30 in the morning. And the next time I look up, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And I get up at 2, 3 in the morning, and then usually I take a nap about 4 or 5, and that kind of gets me to the morning, and then I go to work. But lately I'm so excited that I just write until I have to go to work. The interesting thing is that I'm excited about writing again, and that is amazing. And Ken Kesey, twice in my life, has inspired me to write. This is Nick Collier, checking out.